Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim, today we're going to be talking about aliens, not the ones being rounded up by ICE, but the actual aliens, because a member of Congress was talking about that with Joe Rogan, and that issue seemed to be getting a lot of traction not that long ago. There were congressional hearings, and then it just kind of got cut off. Not really sure exactly what's going on there, but we'll have a couple of clips from that. We'll be talking about how the Democratic Party is moving very clearly in a very bad direction on the policy of Israel. And we're going to be talking about Chuck Schumer and his very insightful thoughts on crime. What crime? In Washington, D.C. But from people who ignore crime to people obsessed with aliens to the Democrats pretty much realizing that their political future requires them to abandon Israel, not a lot of optimism on what we're talking about today, is there, Jim?
Pre-podcast, we had not discussed whether this was a good, bad, or crazy. This is all very heavy in the crazy. Maybe some are a little bit good. Maybe some are more on the bad side. But by the way, like, the other weirdness is that none of these stories have anything to do with the Colorado rabbits with tentacles, which was obviously a major menace. And I want to point out, of everything I've written for NR since I've come back, that has gotten the most traffic because that is what people are most curious about right now.
Let's talk about something else that's really popular, Brooklyn betting. It's very popular in the Corombos house, I can tell you that. Mrs. Corombos and I have had the Brooklyn bedding mattress now for more than a week, and I just can't believe how good this mattress is. Always fantastic support, always a great night's sleep. Mrs. Corombos says she absolutely loves it. We got what's called the Aurora Lux model, which is also a cooling mattress, and it's all made in the United States of America, which is also a major plus.
Listeners, do you sleep hot? Now, keep in mind, I'm not asking, are you hot in bed? I'll just assume that's the case. Brooklyn Bedding uses Glaciotex, which is a trademark, covers, and Copperflex foam, that too is a trademark, to help keep you cool and comfortable all night long. Brooklyn Bedding is one of the few mattress brands endorsed by the American Chiropractic Association for spinal alignment and back health, and they are 100% fiberglass free. Plus, Brooklyn Bedding also offers a 120-night comfort trial. Love it, or they'll help you return or swap it hassle-free. And let's face it, 120 nights? By that point, you know very well whether you like the mattress, and they're confident you're going to love it.
Go to brooklynbedding.com and use our promo code 3ML at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. That's brooklynbedding.com and the promo code 3ML for 30% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know that we sent you. All right, Jim, on to our first crazy martini now, and it's the Democrats' reaction to the crime problem in D.C. Of course, because Trump is taking the step to put the D.C. police under federal control, that has to be the wrong policy because he came up with it, right? Or his administration came up with this. And so he has to be wrong. But instead of saying, no, we have a better approach to this, they're basically landing on, there's not a crime problem here. We're at a 30-year low of violent crime, even though there's reports out there of police officials downplaying crimes, lesser charges. We've talked many times about the FBI system being so convoluted that major cities don't even report a lot of their violent crime. But Chuck Schumer got asked this question by the TikTok podcaster Aaron Parnas, and you'll be shocked to know, Jim, that Chuck Schumer feels perfectly safe in the nation's capital.
A lot of folks on the Republican side, your Republican colleagues, say that they are very scared to walk outside in D.C., that they think this is completely the right thing to do. Senator, are you scared walking around Washington, D.C. these days?
I walk around all the time. I wake up early in the morning sometimes and take a nice walk as the sun is rising around some of the Capitol and the other monuments and things, and I feel perfectly safe. They're full of it. Look, here's what they've done, Aaron. Plain and simple. Donald Trump wants to distract.
Look, if you go for a jogger on the mall at 6, 7 in the morning, it's probably one of the safer times and safer areas of the day. There's a lot of people out there at that time. The sun is out and so forth. But Chuck Schumer, of all people, saying, I don't have to worry about D.C. Jim, you explained in the Morning Jolt today very well why Chuck Schumer is one of the few people in D.C. who probably doesn't need to be concerned.
Well, for starters, as Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer has a security detail. And for obvious reasons, they don't discuss the details of that security detail very much. But back in 2017, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who was then the president pro tem of the Senate, said in a speech that 23 armed guards protect him and his wife around the clock in and around the Capitol and beyond, unquote. So it seems reasonable to conclude that the Senate minority leader would have a comparable level. So let's say 20-some guys who are armed, well-trained, probably very good at their jobs of protecting an elected official. So if you had that security, you'd feel safe everywhere you go too. Like, what are you kidding? This is one of the safest men in America. So, of course he feels safe walking around. Now, not every member of Congress gets that. You only get that when you're in leadership or if there's a particular threat to you. And I went through today's Morning Jolt and listed at least 2 members of the House of Representatives who have either was assaulted in an apartment elevator. Henry Cuellar was unhurt, but that, masked carjackers held him at gunpoint and made off with his car. A staffer was carjacked at gunpoint. Another staffer for Ron Estes, Republican of Kansas, was fatally shot in a drive-by, not the target. Members of Congress are not immune, and their staffers are not immune to crime. I urge people to read today's Morning Jolt because I really enjoyed getting into, okay, look, why are things bad in the District of Columbia? Because you can hear, it's a budget, or they don't have statehood, and all kinds of, there are 3 big problems, and I'm not going to put in a dun-dun, but I just point out that, in the criminal justice... Wait, sorry. Let me get the right register for this. In the criminal justice system, people are represented by 2 separate but completely important groups: police who arrest the criminals and the prosecutors who convict, get them convicted. There are flaws on both sides. The first is number of cops in the District of Columbia employed by the Metropolitan Police Department has declined from about 3,800 in 2020 to 3,100 officers today. That's 700 fewer officers on the street. You can't take away 700 police from a city and not expect that to affect the overall crime statistics. And just, I was like, wow, there's got to be some sizable city that 700 cops is their one. And I found it. Turns out the entire city of Oakland, California, formerly the home of the A's, has budgeted for 678 police in the entire city. Now, you're like, oh my God, that doesn't seem like nearly enough for Oakland, particularly the reputation of Oakland, but I remind you, the Raiders left town. So there's somewhat fewer criminals. There's some Raiders fans out there who will be irked. But it's not like I'm going to visit the black hole anytime soon or anything. So the police budget has been basically flat over the last decade or so, but they have fewer cops on the beat. The district meanwhile was like, it's spending, $87 million to purchase the arena for the Capitals and the Wizards and then lease it back to Ted Leonosis. Is that the best use of city's funding compared to hiring 700 more cops? That does not seem like too good. And the other major questions are, that second part of the Law and Order intro, the prosecutors. I don't know if Jeanine Pirro is going to do a great job. I hope she does well. I would prefer if the president would look beyond the Fox News green room for every cabinet position, it seems. But okay, fine. Good luck to you, Jeanine Pirro. The city needs you to do a good job. The predecessors, who were appointed by Biden, at one point were not bringing charges in 2/3 of the arrests by D.C. police. If you're a cop and the local prosecutor chooses not to press charges, you must be livid about that. And you should not be surprised that crime rates do not get better. The city also has a position called Attorney General. This handles civil cases and misdemeanors and juvenile crimes if the U.S. attorney does not claim it. Washington, D.C. is the only city where the U.S. attorney is handling the major crimes prosecution. So you can just decide which prosecutor is more responsible. The the Attorney General position for D.C. spent last 2 years investigating Federalist Society co-chair Leonard Leo. No charges have been filed. Now, call me crazy, Greg, but if you spend a little more time on juvenile criminal offenders, which, by the way, D.C. has plenty of violent juvenile offenders.
Yes.
And then if you spend a little less time investigating Leonard Leno, call me crazy, I think the city would be in a better shape. So there's more there, but just basically, why is the city in such rough shape? Because they have not spent money on cops, because they have fewer cops in the streets than they used to, and neither prosecutor was doing a good job of prosecuting people. Now, again, good luck to Jeanine Pirro. Hopefully you see something different. I think you can argue that putting a couple hundred FBI agents and DEA agents on the streets, at best, this is a Band-Aid solution. Also, if they're on the streets, they're not doing whatever jobs they were doing before. There are legitimate criticisms to be made of the recent moves of the Trump administration, but it's very revealing that the Chuck Schumer decided to go with, well, I feel perfectly safe going around Washington, and everyone else should too.
That's exactly right. I also love how the left, whether you commit monstrous atrocities or are thoroughly incompetent, it means that we should reward you. Hamas is responsible for killing well over 1,000 Israelis. They're starving their own people for the most part, using their people as human shields. What's the solution, lefties? Oh, we must have a Palestinian state. This clearly calls for a Palestinian state. D.C. can't get its act together with keeping crime under control. Well, obviously, this means we need D.C. statehood. No, we don't do that. You don't need to deserve statehood anyway, even if you did have a competent approach to crime. But especially, we're not going to reward you for being horrible at this job from top to
Greg,
bottom.
if failures get rewarded, I'm starting to understand how these people ended up in leadership of the Democratic Party.
That's exactly right. Oh, well, party politics is a business, and fortunately, your business is hopefully doing better than the Democratic Party and politics in general. But it's an interesting time for business. Tariffs and trade policies are dynamic. Supply chains are squeezed, and cash flow is tighter than ever. And if your business doesn't adapt in real time, you're in a world of hurt. You need total visibility from global shipments to tariff impacts to real-time cash flow. Your solution, NetSuite by Oracle. It's your AI-powered business management suite trusted by more than 41,000 businesses.
NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP that brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and human resources all into one suite. You have one source of truth giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data, and with artificial intelligence embedded throughout, you could automate a lot of those everyday tasks, letting your teams stay strategic. NetSuite helps you know what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast.
Business owners and experts will tell you, let the AI, especially great AI, and there's none better than NetSuite by Oracle, do the things that it can do for you. And if your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our second martini. Certainly crazy, also bad. The Democratic Party is clearly lurching to the left in a number of ways. At first, it was leery of the avowed socialist Zohran Mamdani. Then they've all started embracing him, or at least the vast majority of Democrats. Big tent, they all say. And then there's specific issues. I know you remember as well as I do that Bill Clinton had to pretend he didn't inhale marijuana in 1992 because being a pothead back then was a really bad thing for your political future. By 2004, on the Democratic primary debate stage, everybody except Joe Lieberman admitted that they had smoked pot, and Lieberman apologized for not having smoked pot because he knew that was a politically losing position. Now, unfortunately, that issue is Israel. And it's becoming more and more obvious that the party is going to require, certainly the ever-growing progressive wing of the party, going to require an anti-Israel stance from the nominee. The candidate they focus on here is Pete Buttigieg, who shockingly a while ago was on a podcast and said in basically word salad that he is, we want the hostages back, we want the killing to stop, and he got a lot of blowback from the left on that, including from the Pod Save America guys. And of course, Buttigieg's response was, I get it. It's important to be clear about something this enormous and this painful, and it's just that it's so enormous and it's so painful that sometimes words can fail. Again, apparently, because he still said nothing. But Politico says the response to Buttigieg, normally one of the Democratic Party's most skilled communicators, was telling. Democrats have recalibrated on Israel, and that's already reverberating across the shadow campaign trail as the U.S. relationship with Israel is fast becoming a key litmus test ahead of the 2028 Democratic primary. The Democratic National Committee is weighing 2 different resolutions on the matter, with progressives pushing for elected Democrats to endorse an arms embargo on Israel and recognize a Palestinian state. And it goes on to say Buttigieg now says he would have signed on to Senator Bernie Sanders' proposed arms embargo against Israel, which failed in the Senate, but did get a majority of Democratic senators. So, Jim, it feels like the momentum on the left is very fast building on this issue, and it's bad for our politics and it's bad for national security.
Before I go any further, Greg, I would like to remind every listener, circle this date, August 14th, 2025, on your calendars. Greg Columbus has debuted his Pete Buttigieg impression, and it was pretty good. I think
Impromptu, totally impromptu.
There's a little sing-songiness and kind of this, at McKinsey, we believe that opportunity and crisis are two sides of the same, this. Anyway, my suspicion is between now and 2028, we'll have a lot of time to practice this and a lot of reasons to do this. Also, your point about 2020, by 2004, Democrats were all talking about it. I believe on the debate stage, every Democrat says they smoked, but they did not exhale. So, you mentioned Buttigieg. I think maybe the guy this is most interesting in the context of is J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, who I think by most standards is a rather ridiculous or deeply flawed potential candidate for the Democrats, except that he's a billionaire. And as I wrote in a profile of him for National Review earlier this year, he has outspent all of his opponents by at least 9-1. That's both Democratic primaries and general elections. So on the one hand, there's a part of me that's like, what's it going to be like when he doesn't have that kind of financial advantage? Because you figure some other Democratic candidates out there would be good fundraisers. You figure Gavin Newsom has a good fundraising network out there in California. But when you've got $1 billion to throw around, and Mike Bloomberg did this back in 2020. My kids still say Mike can get it done because there were so many ads popping up in their video games and YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, Mike Bloomberg was not what the Democratic Party was interested in then. I don't know if J.B. Pritzker is going to reach this point, but I just observed. Look, J.B. Pritzker's Jewish, and I wonder if people were saying, Kamala Harris can't pick Josh Shapiro. He's a pro-Israel Jewish governor. Never mind that he's from a really important swing state. Can't pick him. She went with Tim Walz, and look how great that turned out. That this all of a sudden there's just now aversion to Jewish candidates. I guess Joe Lieberman is the only one that Jews ever get. That's it. That's all right. We're all done with our Jewish potential presidential candidate. But Joe Lieberman, best known for being a guest on this podcast. That's the single most significant act in his life. I think if you're a Jewish Democratic presidential candidate, and this is the mood, the ambiance, the air, the kind of the atmosphere of a Democratic presidential primary, you're probably going to have to be even more ardently anti-Jewish. You're going to have to be just vehemently, you'd have to balance it out of suspicion. So, he's Jewish. Well, he might be supportive of Israel somehow. And I think that was a big factor in Josh Shapiro's skepticism in the short-lived Kamala Harris sweepstakes. So, it'll be interesting. The other thing I think we have not really the country as a whole has not grappled with, is that one of the consequences of the October 7th attacks was being pro-Israel is now a scandal in the Democratic Party. It is now a liability. It is now something you need to justify or excuse or attempt to hide or rectify in some way. I remember seeing the nut jobs in the streets celebrating on October 8th and October 9th. I was like, what the heck happened? This, in New York City, the site of the 9/11 attacks, all of a sudden there are folks out there who are celebrating Hamas. And now you see, it is not quite accurate to say the Democratic Party is overtly pro-Hamas. But if you came out in your Democratic presidential primary and you say, I'm a big fan of Bibi Netanyahu, that would probably have a greater consequence in the primaries than saying, I'm a big fan of Hamas. That is the dynamic that's going on over there right now. It is absolutely baffling. And by that standard, you could argue, yes, Hamas has been... a whole bunch of people in Hamas are not around to celebrate any victories, but that's a form of a victory for them.
Utterly unbelievable what has happened in the wake of 10/7 with the Democratic Party. They're obviously already trending in that direction. You don't just automatically have that instinct after a terrorist attack that should have you thinking in the other direction. Whether anybody can stand against the tide, maybe. If they have that faction of the party all to themselves, it'll actually help them. But it seems like everybody feels like they have to lurch further and further to the anti-Israel side. And that's not good for a wide variety of reasons. All right, maybe some phone calls to your lawmakers, governors, congressmen, senators. Try to talk some common sense to them on a whole bunch of different issues, from crime to Israel to everything else. But if you're running a business, you know that every time you miss a call, you're leaving money on the table. And when every customer conversation matters, you need a phone system that keeps up and helps you stay connected. And that's why you need OpenPhone.
OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or computer, so you don't have to carry around 2 phones or use a landline. With OpenPhone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and text like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever.
OpenPhone is now offering 3 Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ML. That's OPENPHONE.com/3ML. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now, and they're all crazy today. But Ana Maria Luna, a Republican congressman from Florida, she was on one of those committees that heard testimony about UFOs, which the government, of course, had to rename. Now they're UAPs, unknown aerial phenomena or something like that, or unidentified aerial phenomena. Anyway, Ana Maria Luna goes on Joe Rogan yesterday, and this is one of the many topics they talk about. And she says, well, we've seen all this evidence. I can't talk about it too much because a lot of it's classified, but basically there's technology that we couldn't possibly have created that has been witnessed by a large number of people. But then they got into what other existence may be behind that. And here's a couple of exchanges between Rogan and Luna.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? Like what happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have.
And then he followed up on the idea of interdimensional life, I guess.
When you say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony, would be based on witnesses that have come forward. But what I can tell you is
the witnesses just were told that they were interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
That is very vague, in fact, Jim. So there was a big hullabaloo about this a couple of years ago, lots of attention. Now it's kind of faded back. So I guess the Congresswoman wants to revive the topic.
So I want to begin by saying, Greg, that if some point in the late 90s, you said to me, Jim, someday there will be a Republican Congresswoman on the cover of Maxim magazine, I would have said, really? Susan Molinari? Who was extremely attractive by the standards of members of Congress. But no, Luna did it back in November, December of last year, that issue. Not that I have it, but I remember seeing it, Googled it to double check, and yes, that was the case. Look, there's this saying that goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if you're going to say that not just the U.S. government, but also, she elaborates, defense contractors have access to this super advanced technology that, I should clarify, because you said at the beginning of this podcast, Greg, that it was aliens, joking about illegal aliens. I'm not sure an extra-dimensional being qualifies an alien because it's not extraterrestrial, meaning not of this planet. It's from a different dimension. Now, I am skeptical of the multiverse theory in part of what it's done to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But then again, the Spider-Man animated movies by Sony have been pretty good about that. So maybe there are worlds in which things are, history has gone different, and it always turns out to be, when you see it in fiction, it's always this, the Nazis won World War II or something. If you see a fictional depiction of an alternate universe, there's like a 98% chance they'll have Zeppelins. For some reason, that's the change that always shows up in these sci-fi shows. The thing that I have always kind of wondered, because we're always like, well, first of all, if alternate dimensions exist, but we can't see them, we can't reach them, we can't, look into them, then what's the point? It doesn't matter if they exist, if it doesn't affect our lives or anything. However, if there are alternate dimensions and maybe transferring from one to another is easy, then, Greg, are you familiar with what they call the Mandela effect?
Explain.
Okay, so this is the thing where a lot of people are absolutely convinced, they remember reading reports that Nelson Mandela died in prison in South Africa in the 80s. Now, there's no evidence of this, but people are absolutely convinced they remember it. And so, there's different things like the spelling of the Berenstain Bears. There are people who are absolutely convinced that Shaquille O'Neal made a movie called like Shazam. It was some sort of genie movie Oh, that's Sinbad. Actually was the guy who did it. So people have these, things that they remember things being different than they actually happened. But what if they have actually moved from one dimension to another? Alternately, every time I lose my keys, is it because I have transferred from a universe where I did leave my keys on my desk, and now I'm in a different universe where it did not, and I left it on the table or in my pants pocket from the day before or something like that? That is how I would explain how I lose things so often. Anyway, this is my theory on the multiverse. Now, having said that, if you're going to be a member of Congress and you're going to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, arguably the biggest podcast in the world, right? It's a really big, it's even bigger than this show. That's how big Joe Rogan's podcast is. And you say, not only the government, but defense contractors have this interdimensional technology. Don't you feel obligated to bring at least a little evidence? Is this really the sort of thing you could say, trust me on? I think you probably, but again, this is not,
It's classified. I'd love to tell you.
That's Andrew Cuomo saying that. I recognize that voice when you do that. So, look, on the one hand, is this a big consequential story? No, but Florida 13th District, is there anybody else there you wanna give a shot at this? Because I'm just saying, you look at this, Marjorie Taylor Greene, AOC, Jasmine, we've got some real winners up on Capitol Hill, and I just kind of feel like, you elect a circus, you get the clowns. Could we just give all of these people a reality show, and they could go and they could enjoy doing what they want, which is to be a celebrity, and we could get people who are actually interested in government policy rather than crazy conspiracy theories about interdimensional travel in the actual job of government.
The sad thing is, Jim, that if there is some other dimension, I'm just going to assume the Jets and the Bears are dominating football there, but we'll never, ever know it.
How do we get to that dimension? How do we transport?
We'll never know. We can only speculate. Anyway, Jim, on that note,
one last point. First of all, I don't believe in these sorts of conspiracy theories, in part because that somewhere in Las Vegas, there would be some guy who'd be hitting on some hot chick and saying, I'm the guy who guards the aliens over at Area 51. There's no way they'd be able to keep it secret, because people our government can't keep secret about anything, and that they think somehow something that would completely alter our understanding of the universe. This is how, and it would have to involve at minimum dozens, probably hundreds, thousands of people to be involved in these secrets, and none of them have ever blurted out anything. That none of them have ever gotten drunk and said, "Oh, let me take you. Oh, you're a cute chick. Let me show you the grays where we keep them underground and stuff like that." No. So I'm very skeptical. And here's the thing. You're telling me all this is going on and Trump never just put it out on Truth Social one day? You're telling me he wouldn't have put this out to get Epstein out of the headlines? Come on, get serious, people.
All good points. Anyway, Jim, have a great Thursday. Talk to you soon.
See you soon, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Also, thank you for subscribing to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already do that, please subscribe. Tell your friends about it as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Thursday. Join us again Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.